Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi, everyone. If you're looking for some courage, inspiration to actually act on things that you have been thinking about, then you're going to want to tune into this conversation today with Gregory Russell Benedikt. Gregory is on a mission to live a story worth telling while helping others to do the same. He is a TEDx speaker, an ICF certified coach who specializes in helping people get the things that money can't buy. He believes what we want most in life, happiness, meaning, fulfillment, and purpose, can't be bought. Rather, they come as a byproduct of having the courage to pursue our biggest dreams and live a life true to ourselves. Through his coaching and speaking, Gregory inspires audiences to playfully face their fears, take bold action, and live a story worth telling. You're going to love this conversation because you will feel not only inspired, but there's like a playfulness to Gregory that I just love, and it reminds us that we don't have to take life so seriously. Enjoy, guys. Hi, Gregory. Welcome today. So excited to have this chat.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know we have a mutual friend, but we're going to go down that route in a little bit. What I really wanted to dive into is this mission that you're on, to be bold, to do things a little differently. And I know you're a coach, and I would love to just start with a bit of your backstory as to how you got to where you are now.
Yes, that's always a question people ask me when they learn I'm coaching. They say, how did you get into this? What was the journey like? What happened? And the short story is that back in 2020, I was working in finance. I was working in private equity. I thought I was working my dream job, and I just started to feel really empty and unfulfilled and uninspired. And then this global pandemic happened, and it made me realize that I'm really unhappy. And if I'm not going to make a change during this time of upheaval and change, then I might never make a change. And I might wake up 35, 40 years down the road, still working in finance, still miserable. And so the short story is I took a very hard left turn. I quit my job in finance. I kind of set my whole life on fire. And I started a nonprofit with a stranger I met on the internet.
As all nonprofits do start, I guess. So just back up for a second. How did you get into finance? Did you love it at some point? Was it like your calling at some point?
I studied finance undergrad, and I actually loved it. I had an amazing teacher who was incredibly tough and difficult, and all of his classes were insane. But I loved the challenge. I loved the analytical nature. I actually enjoyed numbers, both accounting and finance, surprisingly. Pushed my buttons in the right way. And looking back, I realized that a lot of it was just the love of a good challenge and because I had that great teacher. But yes, when I graduated and I started working in finance, I thought that's what I wanted to do. So that's how I got there.
And when you were there, how long was it before you were not quite sure if it was the best fit?
I always joke with people that I had 2 existential life crises by the time I was 25.
Okay.
So my first one was I worked a year in what I thought was financial services consulting. It actually turned out to be internal audit. And after a year, I was like, this is literally the worst job ever created. How can anyone possibly do this? So I quit that job. I moved down to San Diego to work in real estate private equity. And then I worked there for a year and a half. And it started off really good. I was like, okay, this is better. I like what I'm doing. I worked with great people and it was an awesome company. But again, I just started to feel so empty. And I love people. Now that I know myself more, I realize, of course, I have to do something with people. But I was just sitting behind a screen doing financial modeling for our properties. And I think that's where the lack of meaning, lack of connection came from.
And what started to bubble up for you that was giving you the signals that this is not maybe working for you anymore?
I'll go back even further. The real catalyst for all of this was actually at the end of 2019. I was on a trip in Japan with 8 of my college best friends. and woke up one morning violently hungover, so hungover that I couldn't leave the hostel in Japan. And I'm sitting in this little cafe inside the hostel, drinking green tea, trying to put myself back together. And I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and I heard him talking about a woman named Bronnie Ware. And have you heard of Bronnie?
I haven't.
She was a palliative care nurse who sat with over 500 patients in their final days, between 3 weeks to 12 weeks as they went home to die. And she started asking them, what, if anything, do you regret from your life? And it turns out that not only do most people have regrets, but that we all have the same five. And when I was sitting there in that cafe, I learned that the number one regret people have at the end of their life is, I wish I would have had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And when I heard that in that moment, I was in a bad place because I was hungover, but it really slapped me in the face because I realized instantly that I was not living my own life. I was still drinking and partying just because my friends loved Party Greg. I was working a job I hated. I had slowly started to realize that, okay, finance wasn't for me, but as anyone knows, it's absolutely terrifying to think about leaving your corporate job, especially when you don't know what's next. And then the third piece was I had always had this, maybe not always had, but I had started to have this dream bubbling up of working with people in some capacity. Somehow, I loved personal development. I loved talking to people about their goals and what they wanted to achieve in their life. And I didn't really know that professional coaching existed yet, but I knew I wanted to do something with people. So in that moment, I was like, holy shit, I am on the fast track right now to living my life with the number one regret of the dying. And that's when I realized I needed to make a big change. So it was in that moment at the end of 2019 that I decided I was going to go all of 2020 sober. Very interesting year to stop drinking alcohol
Yeah.
and to quit my job in finance. And again, as I mentioned, I quit my job 6 months later.
And was that just like like one day you decided to quit, or was it, and you had been thinking about it, but did you have a date in mind? Because some people, like when they're just thinking the logistics of leaving a corporate job, that's a whole other thing. That can be scary. Where you're like, okay, I'm giving myself 6 months to save up money. I'm going to do this. Like, was there a plan, or was it just one day, like Gregory's out?
There was a bit of a plan and a bit of jumping off the cliff.
Yeah.
I, th- I knew that I had wanted to make a change, so I had been saving money. I was starting to save up a little cushion so I could figure out what was next. It was also a little bit of a slow burn. I started to think about my mission and my values. I was taking a personal development course online from Aubrey Marcus. It was called Go for Your Win.
Hmm.
And we were in this cohort with like 3,000 people all over the world. And we had weekly assignments that were, what's your mission? What's your vision? What are your values? Just things to help get the juices flowing. And it was through that I was like, okay, I need to quit. I wasn't ready to do anything yet. And then I always thought it would be something positive. It was like, yeah, now I have the courage to quit my job and I feel so good about it. But it was actually the negative that caused me to actually make a change. And it was hearing this quote from Charles Bukowski. I don't know if you know him. He's an author who
Hmm.
spent like 60 years of his life working terrible jobs. He was homeless at one point. He was a drunk, like definitely not a role model. But he has this quote about the 9 to 5 and how it's modern day slavery. And again, it was another one of those moments that just kind of punched me in the face and it touched something inside of me. And in that moment, the fear of the unknown and change and all the stuff that was going to happen, that was surpassed by the pain of staying the same.
Hmm.
So that was when I talked to my manager and I was like, I'm out of here. Let me know how many months you guys need, but I can't stay.
Wow. I would agree that it is modern day slavery, the 9 to 5. You get locked in and we're just all trapped. I know that feeling. Um, and it haunts a lot of us, especially that fear that you mentioned that I have heard about, where you have this fear of regret that there's going to be the one day that you wake up and you realize that it was not for you, but it was for others.
And that was my biggest fear. And I was terrified of that. And I call that settling. I was
Hmm.
so afraid that at some point along the way I would settle. And what's worse than settling is when you accidentally settle or you unknowingly settle and you just wake up
Yes.
one day and you're like, what happened? When did this happen?
Yeah, there's a Chris Hadfield quote that was something like that I've always loved. If you don't choose the direction of your life, someone else will choose it for you. Like that kind of concept. Like one day you just realize that you've kind of just been pushed onto a path that you may or may not have wanted. And then you don't even question whether you're interested in it at all anymore. And then you're just there.
100%.
And it's scary. And then you feel like you've settled. But I have a question. What do you say to people? I don't know if they come to you for coaching. Maybe they're not because they're into personal development. But what do you say to someone who's just like, okay with settling? Like they've decided that they have to settle, that going for more is not an option.
If they are happy doing that, then I say, awesome. I love that for you. It's the people who are doing that that deep down are unhappy, that know they're capable of more, but aren't doing anything about it. That's kind of my kryptonite. Those are the people that I really, really want to work with. So it really comes down to how the person feels about what they're choosing. Because again, it is a choice.
And how do you help them kind of see the ways that they're settling or maybe the ways that they're staying stuck? I don't like to use that word because I don't feel we're really ever stuck, but that feeling of being like, I can't move any direction. I have to stay where I am.
I would say that if they are unable to see that they're stuck, or if they're unable to see that they're choosing something that they don't want, then I probably don't work with them.
Mhm.
The people who come to me are the ones who are awakening to the fact that things aren't the way they want them to. And they don't know what to do next, but they know they want to make a change.
Mhm. So, what was one of the scariest? I'm going to ask two parts to this question, but first, what was one of the scariest things that you experienced or felt when you made that decision to piece out of corporate?
The scariest thing was telling my parents. This was the second time that I had the conversation with my parents that I was quitting my job. But the first time was, oh, hey, I don't like this job. I just passed this really prestigious financial test called the CFA. I'm going to use
Mhm.
that to leverage my way into more traditional finance. So, yes, I'm quitting my job, but don't worry. I'm going down a safe, defined path next, and it'll be okay. And this time, I remember I called my dad and I told him, I'm quitting my job again. 50% of my plan is to have no plan. And I'm trusting in the universe and I'm taking bold action for the first time in my life. And as you can imagine, I mean, you don't know my dad, but he's super logical, rational, analytical as well. And he's just like, that doesn't make any sense. And so it was really scary at first because I was going to do everything on my own. I wasn't asking for any support financially from my parents, but you always want your parents to buy into what you're doing and you always want them to believe in you. And so the scariest moment was when I realized I had to make this leap and this decision without their approval. And funny enough, the moment I accepted that and said, I'm doing this, whether you want to be on board or not, it was actually that self belief that helped get them on board in the end.
Okay, so now the flip side of that, what was one of the best things or an immediate payoff from leaving that job?
It's something that I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about today. It was the first moment in my life that I realized the universe rewards bold action because the moment I decided to make that change, I had no idea what I wanted to do next. And I was serendipitously introduced to the stranger on the internet who ended up becoming my business partner. And I have story after story after story about how these types of synchronicities work. But literally, I decided finally that I was leaving. And then a stranger from that Go For Your Win group, again, there's 3,000 people in this group. A woman reached out to me and said, hey, I know you don't know me, but I've been reading all of your stuff. And I need to connect you with a guy who also lives in San Diego. He's not even in this program, but I'm in this other program with him. And you guys are verbatim saying the same thing. So you guys need to meet.
Wow. Okay, so what happened next?
So we met, we jumped on a FaceTime and we hung out like twice in person. And then he told me a vision that was essentially my vision, just through a nonprofit lens. And we co founded the nonprofit. And over the next 18 months, we raised $112,000. We partnered with the International Coaching Federation. And it was through that that I learned about coaching, because what we did is we partnered professional leadership coaches with underserved high school students, and getting to see the impact that meeting with a coach had on our students' lives, and then also my life, because I was meeting with a coach for the first time. It just blew me away.
Yeah.
And it made me realize that this is what I'm here for. This is what I need to do. And so I went to University of San Diego and did a year-long leadership coaching certificate.
See, I live for these stories. I live for these moments where we don't really know what's going to happen, but where, as you're telling me the story, I do get the sense that you knew there was something else for you, which is actually a mindset in itself. It's like thinking something else could exist beyond what I've done. I think I've seen people like radically or just quickly quit their job, but they don't have any belief that something else could be out there for them. And so therefore it does kind of hit a brick wall. So I've seen that happen. But interestingly, I think your mindset was a huge piece of this, even though it was still blurry, didn't have really a focal point yet. But and then you meet this guy.
And I will say two things. One is that at that point in my life, as the analytical, risk-averse young man who worked in finance, I thought that passion and fulfillment were for other people, not me. I did not believe that I could possibly find something to do for work that I loved, because I had spent so long. I had spent many years as I was working these jobs, desperately trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was reading every personal development book, listening to every podcast. I'd taken a couple other online courses that didn't really go anywhere. One called 1K on the side, where you basically just tried to make $1,000 through some sort of side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really struggling. So the mindset was definitely questionable there.
Mm-hmm.
But the second part was that for the first time in my life, I had this feeling that I would be okay if I took a risk, if I stepped into the unknown. And I really think, looking back, it was my soul being like, hey, buddy, we really need to get out of here. Otherwise, we're not going to be okay.
Yeah, it's amazing how those nudges kind of creep up on us. I want to talk about the risk part, because this also ties into obviously being bold, which I know is part of your mission. I've always loved that quote: "Fortune favors the brave," or "Fortune favors the bold." I don't know, it's both, right?
Yeah.
People are scared to take risk, and you just said you were risk adverse. So there had to be a tipping point where I guess the pain was too much to stay where you were.
Yes, the pain eclipsed the fear of change. And there's a really cool change formula by the Conscious Leadership Group. I'm going to mess it up because I don't have it in front of me, but basically, your pain needs to get greater than the resistance you're facing, and you won't change until that happens.
Yes.
And you have to have a vision, and you have to have first steps. And first steps is anything to just get the ball moving. And once those things are greater than the fear of change, then a flip is switched and it'll happen. But going back to the risk piece, a huge thing that helped in the moment, and also now that I talk to people about, is that I truly think that the biggest risk is not changing. It was learning about the regrets of the dying, and how I knew what was going to happen if I didn't change. I was going to have those regrets, and seeing myself down the road having those made the change so much easier, because I realized that the riskiest thing I could do is do nothing and hope that somehow I became more happy and fulfilled with what I was doing.
Yeah, it's that just sitting there and hoping that things will change or that the experience will be different is not, it's not usually too helpful in helping us move forward and make that shift. Just curious about that, because I know so many people. I work a lot in the creative community, and I've worked in graphic design. I would say, if I was to generalize, a lot of creative people, especially in the design world, they're a little risk adverse, because a lot of creative jobs, there's not as many creative jobs out there as other jobs, right? It's like a smaller like work pool in a way. So it's like, if I don't keep this that I have, there's nothing for me. Like, that can be the mindset that kind of starts to filter in, and it starts to take over the body. So I'm very curious to just see how people can shift that and start to believe that something else can be out there for them.
I think the stories we tell ourselves are everything. And also what we are optimizing for is extremely important. And I came to the realization, I remember again telling my dad this, and he didn't love this either. I wanted to live a non-ordinary life. I wanted to live an extraordinary life. And if quitting my job and crashing and burning and having to reinvent myself and go through some really hard times, if that was what was going to happen, I would actually still prefer that to staying safe, comfortable, boring, ordinary, normal in my job. I really wanted to go off script and do something different. So no matter what happened, the moment I quit my job, I was, air quotes, successful
Yeah.
because that was the most important thing to me, is having the courage to go for it. Again, it didn't even matter what happened.
Yeah.
I just wanted to prove to myself that I had the courage or the tenacity or whatever we want to call it to make a change.
So then now that you're stepping into this more bold version of yourself and you're making these bold moves, what are some of the things that you have noticed in your life that have changed?
One of the biggest changes is me. I legitimately feel I'm actually about to take the Enneagram exam through a Enneagram interview, which I guess is more official than the test, but it's wild. I actually feel like I've changed my personality over
Mhm.
the last 5 years, which I know isn't supposed to happen, but I'm a completely different person than I was 5 years ago because I've leaned into trusting in the universe. I've leaned into taking bold action. I've really leaned into getting out of my comfort zone. And that is one of the things that I recommend to everyone. The more time you can spend outside of your comfort zone, not only changes you, but it changes the pool of opportunities that you have access to because you're just getting out there in the world.
Can you share an example of a bold move that you've made other than leaving your corporate job, which was badass? Is there something else, like another example you can share that will help inspire people to kind of just like maybe even something smaller to think about how they can, just show up differently?
Let's start big and then we can
Okay.
go small. Some of the biggest bold moves I've made, and it's actually something that has led to a bit of my personal brand. I created this life mantra called "Live a Story Worth Telling." Because again, I'm big on the stories we tell ourselves. I want to live an extraordinary life. And I got it tattooed on my arm as a personal reminder. It's also something called a commitment device. A commitment device is any action that we can take in the present moment to lock in a desired future. And for me, again, biggest fear getting to the end of my life, realizing I settled. I realized that if I got this mantra, which is very personal to me, live a story worth telling, tattooed on my arm, I have a strong inner critic, and there's no way that this inner critic would let me live a safe, ordinary life. And so it was creating that life mantra, getting it tattooed on my arm, and then realizing, oh crap, I actually have to take bold action and live up to this. So I ended up meeting my girlfriend by walking up to her in a crowded cafe, interrupting the man across from her at the table who was talking, and giving her my phone number.
I bet she loved that. I feel like a girl, like every girl wants to have a gut. I mean, not in a weird way, but I feel like, well, you're such a nice person. But I mean, it's just, uh, it is a bold thing that I think people would appreciate. So, how did she receive it?
It was great. She was a little shocked in the moment. I was too. I think I kind of blacked out throughout the whole experience because she was sitting at a table with another guy and another woman. And I wasn't getting boyfriend vibes from this guy. And again,
Okay.
I interrupted him in a super polite way. I was like, hey, man, so sorry to interrupt. Uh, Whatever. And then I turned to her and I was like, hey, you're really cute, which means you probably have a boyfriend. But if you don't, here's my phone number. And I had written my phone number on the back of a receipt. I slid it across the table. And when I did, she blurted out, I don't have a boyfriend. And I said something silly, said, have a good day. And I walked away. And she ended up texting me. And what is it? It's July 9th. She's moving in September. And we've been together for 2.5 years.
That's amazing. And that's a great opening line. No pressure, friendly, and that's bold. That definitely takes guts, which I'm sure she appreciated because I think we forget that our bold actions can be appreciated by others. We think so much about how it's going to make us feel, but what about someone on the other end?
It is such a gift to other people as well because it creates this moment of connection. It creates a funny story for them to go tell other people. It can inspire them, even if they're on the receiving end. And going back to what you said about fortune favors the bold, that has been one of my favorite quotes my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And before all of this, kind of at the same time, so many different things were percolating and happening at the same time. But I started to really think about that quote. And I was like, okay, fortune favors the bold. Well, fortune is kind of like what happens to us in life. And I'm big on stoicism, like separating what we can control and what we can't. So I was like, okay, we can't really control what happens to us in life, but we can control how bold we are being. And I had a hypothesis that if I turned up the boldness in my life, that maybe all these things that happened to me would also increase. And so meeting my girlfriend was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that worked. And I tell people all the time, that was 10 seconds of terrifyingly bold action. And it rewarded me with the best romantic relationship of my life and fundamentally changed my life. So I'm really big on people taking terrified action. Whatever you have to do. My palms were sweating. I was sweating through my shirt. I was probably not very smooth when I was saying all those things. But again, if you can just get yourself into that uncomfortable mode for 10 seconds, it can change your life. And that went so well that I was like, wow, I want to test this hypothesis. Does fortune favor the bold? And so that's when I embarked on a 100-day challenge where for 100 days I would try and go around San Diego and get rejected by strangers in the most hilarious and outrageous ways possible.
Just randomly walking around?
Randomly walking around. On day number 4 of this challenge, I knocked on a stranger's door and I asked if I could cannonball in his swimming pool.
And what was the answer?
He was awesome and he said yes. I was shocked, but it was hilarious. I showed up with a swimsuit and a beach towel, which again, like any 8-year-old in the neighborhood would do that, and that'd be pretty normal. I remember doing that back in the day, like going and trying to jump on people's trampolines. But I was 28 at the time, so it was a little different. And he said yes. We filmed a short video of me jumping in his pool, and I posted it on Instagram, and it went viral. And so for the rest of the 96 days of my challenge, I literally had thousands of people giving me recommendations about what I should do next. I should ask a stranger for a piggyback ride. I should ask someone if I could drive their car. I should ask someone if I could cook them dinner in their own home. And it was a wild adventure that really showed me, again, going back to the boldness and the people appreciating it, it showed me that each time you take bold action, it's this beautiful moment of connection if there's someone else involved. I had so many hilarious moments where people were just like stunned, laughing at me. I was laughing at myself. People said yes to a lot of crazy things. And it really solidified my belief that the universe rewards bold action. So not only is taking bold action advantageous because you get the result of making some bold ask, but if you consistently do that and you keep getting out of your comfort zone, I believe the universe is watching and it starts to bring all of the right people, the right opportunities to you, doors start to open. And going back to the synchronicity and the serendipity, crazy magic starts to show up in your life if you're willing to take bold action.
It's totally wild. I remember sitting in a job interview. I never forgot this. And I've told people, I help people with interview preparation. And I was really young, it's like second or third job in. And this job paid like 50% more than what I'd be making, which was basically the poverty level. So I was really excited to get out of that awful poverty level role. And I'm in the job interview. I'm sure there were a lot of people who wanted the job. And I just looked the interviewer straight in the eye at the end. And I just said, I really want this job. Like the most direct eye contact. I didn't blabber on. I just was like, I really want this. And the guy looked at me and he's like, I love this. I love that. And he just like, he was so excited that I expressed such bold interest in the job that, yeah, I got the job.
Well done.
Yeah. And I was so young and it was a moment. It was a moment where I could have just shrunk back and I was really insecure about my work, really insecure about my portfolio, was beaten down from making like no money. And I could have just shrunk in the moment. And I really did make a conscious choice to step up.
That's what's so amazing about bold action and getting out of your comfort zone in any way is that you don't actually have to feel confident and courageous. You can fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And that's why I call it taking terrified action. You drag yourself, sweaty palms and all, out of your comfort zone for those 10 seconds to do something, to say something, to walk up to someone. And even if you're scared, it's still effective. And it's actually doing it when you're scared that's the most effective.
Yeah, I think calling it out like terrified action is the best way to go because you're not pretending that the fear doesn't exist. I mean, there's that book from years ago, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway,
Love that
which,
book.
yeah, it's a great book. I mean, it's the whole premise is pretty simple. It's like you've got to walk through that moment to get to where you want to go.
And I am a huge proponent of that. And I really try and make that part of my brand. Like I'll always highlight the fact when I'm sweating through a shirt, or I'll call out that I'm extremely nervous right now. And that's something that can get lost if people hear about my message, but they don't hear it from me. They think, oh, I've always been confident and bold. And that is not the case. I was shy. I was timid. My mom still always jokes. She's like, you're the bold guy now? Like you were always so timid as a kid. And I used it to kind of change myself and create myself into someone who's a lot more courageous.
Right. And I do, what you said earlier about changing personality, I do believe that we can step into different versions of ourselves. I would say, I think of it more as the different identity, which we can completely change our identity. So the question for me is I'm constantly questioning myself and challenging clients. How willing are you to be in that new identity?
I love that.
Right? Because once we step into a new identity, we have to let go of what the versions before. So you're no longer that shy kid who maybe, or someone wants to hide in the back of the room and do things like that. So if you let that person go, there's kind of a death that comes with that. There's a grief process that comes with that. And then you have to acclimatize to the new identity.
I love that so much. And I'm actually putting pieces together that I haven't in the past around that's the first step when I work with new clients. Step number one is define your new identity.
Okay.
And the reason we start there is because figuring out who you want to become is so important because it informs the rest of your life. But also, you setting goals and you talking about your dreams now in this moment might be different than in 3 months when you've defined your new identity. And
Absolutely.
I see that all the time with clients. We start out and we achieve all 3 goals that they want right away. And then once we do the identity work, they're like, wow, I'm glad we achieved those things, but that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
This is what matters. And now let's go after that.
Yeah, we're scratching the surface in the beginning. And I think that's a normal part of the transformation process is to maybe start something that feels more accessible, more attainable. I do something with clients called being who you want to be. It's who do you actually want to be?
Yes.
And then you start dripping and planting the seed that they can be different than they are now. It doesn't have to stay the same. But this is through the action. This is through the bold action that you're talking about.
It's through bold action. And then it's also through not bold action, which is just the daily habits. Yeah. And I think this is cool that you think this way as well, because I think that focusing on who we want to become is so important. Because once you figure out who you want to become, especially if you look at it through the lens of this is who I want to become with my finances, this is who I want to become with my fitness, this is who I want to become with my family, then you simply ask yourself, okay, what would that version of myself do?
Exactly.
And then it's pretty obvious, okay, start doing these things and create habits out of them.
Yeah, you got to get down to the habits. If you want to be this really healthy version of yourself, well, what would the healthy version do? They'd probably pay more attention to their diet. They might, the exercise and building it all in. So then how do you approach habits? I'm always very curious about habits because I don't love the word habit for some reason. It just gives me it annoys me, but I'm also really into habits. So I feel like I'm a bit of a walking contradiction. How do you feel? How do you work those into your life?
I think it's really important to figure out what things you need to do on a daily basis to become the version of yourself that you want to become. And eventually, those just become part of who you are. So I believe in defining habits, tracking habits for a period of time, but then once you've done it for long enough, it just becomes part of who you are. I don't need to track meditating for 10 minutes a day anymore. I don't need to track going to the gym. I track the weights I'm doing so I can continuously be progressing, but I don't need to say, oh, this is how many days I went this week because it's just part of who I am. I love it. I think they're really important, especially when it comes to behavior change, because they just set you up and set your life up in a way. Like it's really hard to not be healthy and happier if you have a habit of getting 8 hours of sleep per night, or you have a habit of exercising, whether it's in the morning or the evening. So I really think that they are building blocks for what we want most, which I talk a lot about dreams. And a thing that I see quite often that's a problem is that people have these big dreams. They have the bucket list and they have these things that they want to go do and they want to go scuba dive the Great Barrier Reef, but they aren't at the level, they aren't the person yet who can handle that big dream. And so what I do with people is we define their big dreams and we create a dreams list, and then we break those down into bite-sized bold actions so they can move closer to the dream. But as they're doing that, we're also working on them as a person and we're building them into the person who can hold and sustain and actually live in that dream. So it is a combination of breaking the dream down. Okay, say you want to, this is a real example. Say you want to scuba dive the Great Barrier Reef. Well, what would step 1A be? Okay, maybe it's getting scuba certified. And okay, you live in San Diego, let's go get scuba certified together. So that's actually something I'm doing with a client to take that first step. And then in addition to that, it's starting with habits, getting those comfortable. And let's just say like breath work is a good habit for scuba diving potentially. Okay, start with a 5 minute per day breath work habit. And then once you get comfortable with that, maybe you book like a 2-day breath work workshop. And then that's more of a challenge. So it's habit, challenge, and then kind of the dream experience. If it was in the breathwork realm, it would be, okay, then you go on like a week-long breathwork meditation retreat. But most people try and go, oh, I'm just going to go book a week-long breathwork meditation retreat, and they've never done breathwork. And so they're not the person who is like capable of really enjoying that dream.
Yeah, it's the small incremental steps that we tend to forget about and dismiss. I don't know if it's because we think they're insignificant or it just, sometimes I think if we ignore the small steps, it allows us to push the dream away for longer. Do you know, instead of actually stepping into it?
Totally. And so
Yeah.
going back to the question about how do I feel about habits, I think they're incredibly important. What we do on a daily basis is how we live our lives. And I don't like getting super in the weeds, tracking things for too long. I think it's
Yeah.
important for short periods of time to give you awareness. Oh, wow. I thought I was sleeping 8 hours a night and I'm sleeping 6 hours a night.
Yeah.
So short periods of kind of tracking and awareness are really important, but doing it over the long term, I agree. It just feels kind of
Yeah,
meh.
that's just that's me, but I like to have the data in the beginning. And then I was like, okay, this is great. It gets me conscious and aware, make some changes, and then I just want to tune in to see how I'm feeling. If that to me is like, if it's working or not.
And for me, a huge unlock was realizing that a habit, setting a habit and also tracking a habit, it really just comes down to intention. Like
Mhm.
I intend to do this thing every day because I think it'll make my life better. And then the tracking component is just, if you can approach it from a place of curiosity and not judgment, then it's so much easier. It's like, I intended to do this. Interesting. I didn't do it. Why not?
Yeah.
Or I did do it and I feel good about it. So it's really, if you can approach it from a place of this is what I intend to do, and then approach it with like a learning mindset, let's check in to see if I did it. That feels so much better than just beating yourself up because you haven't
Yeah.
done 12 days in a row.
No, beratement doesn't get us anywhere. It
Yeah.
really doesn't. Like we think it does. I always remember this one friend I had, and the only way she knew to get herself to work out was to literally just like beat herself up mentally. And I was like, that is just not a long-term plan. And I remember consciously thinking, I don't want to do that to myself. I don't want that to ever be my motivation for doing something. It's exhausting. You're just basically relying on cortisol and stress to like get yourself moving, right?
That is cheap, dirty fuel. That's like burning coal.
Yeah.
It's effective, but not sustainable.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can learn to love exercising and you can change your identity, I feel like that's more solar power, wind power. It's sustainable over the long term.
Oh, that's a great analogy. I love that. So, what do you do when life is unpredictable, as it is often? How do you navigate that and manage? It's not always going to go as planned, right? I mean, you've had some beautiful synchronicities, some amazing events, but I'm guessing there's some things that haven't gone the way you expected. How do you navigate that?
I can answer this question on so many different levels. The most simple level is I kind of want to go from a higher level first. We'll go with that. Basically, I question everything. I love asking questions, and I love thinking about how all of this is fake. All of this is made up. Like, we literally live on a rock hurtling through space in the middle of this big black void. So when something goes wrong, it really helps me to just zoom out and realize that nothing actually matters. And I mean this in a good way, not a hopeless, nihilistic way.
Yes.
Just being like, wow, this thing kind of sucks in the moment. It doesn't actually matter in the long run. That makes me feel better. If I'm ever really stressed, I'll go outside at night and look at the stars. Just be like, I am tiny and none of this matters.
Mm-hmm.
But on a more practical level, realizing that two things. One is that human beings were designed for struggle. Like, that is actually how we find meaning
Mm-hmm.
and overcome challenges is a crucial part of our existence. So anytime a challenge or something crappy shows up, realizing that it's actually an opportunity for growth. It's actually almost a good thing if you can take it that far.
Mm-hmm.
That's really helpful. And the second piece is that, like I mentioned earlier, I'm really big on stories and living a story worth telling. And if the story was the hero storms the castle and the dragon's asleep and there's not even a fight, that's a terrible story. There has to be conflict for a story to be good. There has to be highs and lows, ups and downs. The hero has to get punched in the face a few times. Otherwise, it's just not an interesting story. And so that really helps me whenever I'm navigating uncertainty, whenever I'm up against something that I would have preferred not to have happened. I realize, okay, this is a moment in the story where I get to show what I'm made of. I get to grow, I get to evolve. And like I said, if there's no conflict, there's no story.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I started to do this show, even though it's called Ditch the Struggle, it's really about ditching the unnecessary struggle, the stuff that, like, because we need the big stuff. We do need those hurdles. We need to be punched in the face multiple times. Like, I know I have, for sure.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I've cultivated for myself is just seeking voluntary discomfort.
Yeah.
That was like a previous chapter of my life. I helped lead a fitness community called Men and Women of Discomfort. And it was literally all about going out and seeking voluntary discomfort so that when involuntary discomfort comes, we're ready for it. And if you go out and do hard things, the challenges, the obstacles that come up through everyday life, through work, are just not that bad.
Yeah.
You're like, I've already done something today that's harder than this.
It's
Okay.
totally a brilliant strategy. And I can look back on certain things, some of the hardest things in my life. And I do find myself when I'm up against something else, well, I got through that. That was like 100 times harder than this. So I'll just make it through. It's different, but I'm going to make it through.
Yeah. And then the craziest thing I've heard recently, that's why I took so long in answering the question. Like, there's so many different levels to answer this at, but I am walking down the path of spirituality a bit. And again, I don't know if this is true or not, but I was talking with someone yesterday, and I really enjoy the belief that we are infinite souls and that we come back in this life for a specific purpose. Like, this life is one book on the bookshelf of our soul. Again, who knows if that's true or not, but it's pretty fun to go through life believing that.
Yes.
And this person I was talking to was saying, our eternal soul had inner peace, bliss, joy, love. It exists in a state of perpetual amazingness. And it intentionally chooses to come back to earth, to struggle, to get punched in the face, to overcome all these things, to ditch the struggle. And if that's the case and it's coming back here for a reason, then every time things are challenging, that's actually the purpose.
Yes.
And I never thought about it like that, because as I start to listen to some of these spiritual teachers, they talk about opening your heart and letting go of attachment to outcomes has been huge for me recently.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always, okay, doing these things in pursuit of more inner peace and more inner joy. And then I had this thought about, okay, what if that's actually not the point? What if the purpose is to really face the obstacles and the challenges head on? Like, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Walk through the fire.
That feels interesting. That's a completely different paradigm I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and I'm on board with that. I feel like I've also been cultivating that level of acceptance of what we have to go through, and it's part of this soul's journey for this lifetime.
And who knows if that's true? I love these big questions that no one will ever know until you die, and then maybe you won't even know then.
Yeah.
But I'm a big believer in adopting belief systems that are useful and fun. So if believing that the universe is this benevolent force that's helping me and that it rewards bold action and that it likes when I get out of my comfort zone, that helps me live a more fun, extraordinary life. Who cares if it's true?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. Okay, so now I'd love to ask you a question I ask all my guests, and that is, in the spirit of helping people ditch the struggle, the unnecessary struggle, what do you feel is most important to commit to?
I'll give an obvious answer and a non-obvious answer. The obvious answer is committing to starting to get out of your comfort zone as much as possible. Like I mentioned, there's so many reasons. The universe rewards it. You get benefits from the action itself, whether it's asking someone or like you did in the job interview saying, I really want this job. Even if you hadn't gotten the job, that moment changed that person's perception of you forever. I've seen it with clients where they go for a job that they're not qualified for within their company. They don't get that job because they're not qualified, but their leadership team starts to look at them differently, starts to invite them to these other meetings and these other things because they're like, oh, I didn't even know that you were this type of bold person. So the obvious answer is start getting out of your comfort zone as often as you can. Realize that the sweaty pits, the sweaty palms, that's part of it. That's perfect. If you aren't terrified as you're doing these things, that's more cause for alarm.
Yes.
The less obvious answer, there's so many I want to give, but one, I don't even know which one I want to choose. Realizing that you don't know how things are supposed to play out. And that's the letting go of attachments. One of the things I'm working on right now is the retreat with Catherine and Peter, and enrollment has been a struggle. Dozens, if not hundreds of people have said, I would love to come to this, but I can't because I'm on vacation this date. I'm at a friend's wedding this date, XYZ. And it's hard to not get bummed out by that, to think that we're doing something wrong because people are busy. But who am I to decide that it was supposed to happen in a certain way? And maybe this first gathering we're doing in August is meant to be the three of us coming together to have almost like a company offsite to plan the vision for this thing we're creating. And so that has been, especially when it comes to ditching struggle, if you just let go of your attachment to outcomes and just show up and enjoy the way things actually unfold because you can't change them anyways, it's such a different experience of life.
Yeah. It's going with the flow as opposed to like just, as they say, paddling upstream. And I love that. Seeing, like accepting that there could be a different way for something to transpire that's actually for your greatest and highest good.
Yes, it's just showing up, no expectations, eager and excited that you woke up this morning and that you get to be here instead of being like, oh man, it's going to rain today. I really didn't want it to rain, and all these different things that you have absolutely no control over.
Amazing. And I do know you are hosting this amazing retreat. I'm going to put the link below if anyone is interested in finding out more about it. We have more to share about it because we're going to have more conversations about it coming up. So in the meantime, where can people find you? How can they follow your mission to be brave and bold and get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn. I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And then I would love to put my TEDx talk in the show notes.
Yes, it's so good. I listened to it and it's like only 8 or 9 minutes long, and you'll hear more about Gregory's story of the cafe and his girlfriend. It's such an endearing, it's very inspiring. I love it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the kind words, and thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, Gregory. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, Alana.
Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.